Our next presenter, I'm very excited to welcome him to the stage. It was actually, for me, really cool to meet someone who actually built the product that I have played in the past. So our next presenter comes to us from Qualtrics. He is the lead product manager there. And he spent several years at Zynga building products such as Words with Friends. So without further ado, please help welcome Shek Viswanathan. Shek, welcome.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me around there at the back? Awesome, great. I'll start off with a question. How many of you are PMs with less than 5 years of experience? Just kidding, just kidding. I just want to make sure everybody is awake and ready for this. Thanks for the intro. My name is Sheikh. I'm a product manager at Qualtrics. We actually don't have titles, so I'm just a product manager, just like most of you are. And what makes my job really, really difficult is there's this amazing quote that I always refer to. Being a product manager is really difficult. You cannot make everybody happy. There is a portion of your customer base or your stakeholders that are going to be extremely unhappy because you're a ruthless prioritizer. There's another profession where everybody's happy with what you do. Anyone knows what the profession is? Bartender is great. You know who does not like bartenders? Folks who are below 21 years of age, right? But if you sell ice cream, everybody loves you. So if you want to be a product manager and if you're scared about sending people, a certain portion of your people are unhappy, go sell ice cream. Without further ado, I've had an amazing opportunity to work both in enterprise tech and also in consumer tech. Enterprise tech is really interesting in the sense that you're backed by 3-year licenses. Your customers have to use a product. So if you're not monitoring usage over a period of time, right, when it comes to renewal, your customer success managers are running behind you as a product manager, and they're like, hey, this customer hates us. But the metrics don't say that, right? They retain for 3 years. Guess why? Right? They paid us for 3 years. They better use the product, right? And they've been using the product. But you know what? They hated the product. So how do you figure that out? And then consumer tech. I went out and launched a game. On day 1, we had 800,000 users. Amazing, rooftop party. We had a Paris theme in the office, and the next day we had 50,000 users. So I've tried to boil down all these learnings into sort of a framework that I've come to use, and I beg and plead, at least 5 of you take pictures of that framework and go spread the word. I would love to. I'd love to. The thing that I want to try is I want to pressure test this framework. Please go back and use this framework at work and let me know. Send me feedback. Has this been useful? This is absolutely the most ridiculous framework I've ever seen. Please don't do this presentation again. That's great feedback as well. And I promise I'll collect it in a central location. So the big question I want to lead with is, as a product manager, how do you know that your product, your customers are enjoying and using your product on a daily basis? And how do you know that your product is successful? How do you know if the product's healthy? Everybody has feedback. How many of you in the room have had a CEO come up to you and say, Sheikh, you're doing something completely wrong. This is the feature you got to build. Go figure out. How many of your CEOs are extremely vehement that this is the feature that's going to be most successful? How many of you, absolutely, one guy, your CEO, all the others have amazing CEOs. How many of you had that one customer that's extremely, extremely engaged, that believes that their roadmap is the roadmap you've got to go build? I know Suzanne for sure, that the bear hugger at the London conference was one such user. But you get a lot of feedback from a lot of sources, but how do you know if your product is actually healthy? What sort of metrics can you take a look at to understand if your product is actually healthy? So understanding and improving your product health comes down to breaking customer signals into a suite of metrics, and then identifying what among those metrics can you really improve on so that you can position your product for growth. And this is the framework that I want to introduce here. It's a 4-step process. It's the same as losing weight, right? You eat, diet, exercise, eat less and lose weight. Same thing. But at the core here, step one is understanding what your core loop is. And I have roughly about 55 blank faces staring at me, asking me, what the hell is a core loop? So I'll get down to that, but that's the foundation. So when I explain what a core loop is, I'll give you a couple of examples of what it means in product. The second thing is building a growth model based on KPIs that are from the product, that tell you that these are the most important ones that you should be focusing on. The third is identifying which of those KPIs or key product metrics that you need to care about. There are quite a few, including your CEO being a metric. But do you know if your CEO is going to be an influencer for your product to grow? Good question. And the fourth is ruthless prioritization. You're not selling ice cream. You have to figure out which customers you want to keep happy, and then how do you make maximum bang for buck for the limited investment and limited time that you have in a day. So starting with the core loop. These are some examples of what a core loop looks like. Four products that I've used. Words with Friends is a game that I built, and I hope some of you have played the game. Hopefully. How many of you have played Words with Friends? Wow, that's awesome. So playing a word, playing a turn, is a core action. It's a fundamental action that somebody can take within your product to realize some benefit. With poker, it's playing a hand. Texas Hold'em poker, it's playing a hand. With Facebook, it's making one post. So people might argue that just reading Facebook is a core action. Yeah, it might be. With Instagram, apparently millennials call it gramming. Sure, I'll go with it. But completing the core loop is correlated to long-term retention. Here's where things get really interesting. When someone plays a word in the first 24 hours, and this is a metric that I watch really carefully, after install, they're more likely to return the next week than somebody else. So if you were to build these cohorts, you clearly understand who's going to stick with you and who's going to not. And with Facebook, this is a well-understood metric in the Bay. Everybody talks about this. Facebook tries to get you to sign up with 7 friends within 10 days because they know that you're likely to retain forever if they do that. Go back home, create a Facebook account, don't add any friend. Be the most antisocial person ever. They'll send you an email with 10 recommendations for the next 7 days, and then repeat that over and over and over again. So it's clearly related to their focus of pushing you to complete the core loop, because it's highly correlated to long-term retention. Just measuring core loop action is not useful. You have to sort of understand how you can elevate the user from doing one of the core loop actions to getting to a commitment with your product. So with Words with Friends, we measured something called creating a game with others. It's a long-term commitment. If you create a game with somebody else who's a friend, you're likely to play with that person for 2 weeks. Guess what? You will return next week because you have the social pressure. You have the peer pressure of having to engage with the product because somebody's waiting on you. Same thing with Facebook as well. If you add friends, you're posting pictures, status updates, etc. Here's a framework I want to leave you with, which I've borrowed heavily from gaming. It's called the dual core loop. It's what we had to really do this in gaming because it's a question of existence. What clearly differentiated a highly sticky, highly engaging game versus a failure was a strong dual core loop. And let me explain what a core loop means. And there are 2 parts to this. There's an inner loop and there's an outer loop. An inner loop usually starts with a trigger or a notification. I have some friends here who work at Remitly. So this might be something related to an exchange rate just dropped. You might want to go, or an exchange rate increase, right? That makes more sense. The exchange rate just increased, so you might want to go make a transaction. That's a notification. And you get into the inner loop, and you make some sort of a low investment as a user, and you do some sort of passive activity or a lightly active activity, and this is what drives a daily habit. Having a really strong inner loop is extremely important and foundational. And then the outer loop starts with a user-initiated task. I just explained if you're a Words with Friends player, you're starting a game with a friend of yours. That's a user-initiated task. Usually is a high investment because you're going to be engaged with the game for maybe 2 weeks. And the difference between the inner loop and the outer loop is the reward. The inner loop usually has some sort of a minor reward. You're gamifying the system. I want to really know when the exchange rate is the best, and I'll make a transaction at that point of time. And you sucker, you didn't sign up for notifications because you care about privacy, right? So there's some sort of intrinsic motivation there. And then for the outer loop, it's a major reward. You made the transaction, you made a bonus, and we reward you with something that you can easily you can feel it. It's tangible. Go to the second step of the model. You've identified what your core loop is. And if the day and age of mobile right now, if you read the Mary Meeker report, engagement on mobile has surpassed that on the laptop, right? 3.3 hours on mobile versus 2.9 hours on web. So you need to really find out what's more sticky on mobile. You have a really small time slice for somebody on mobile. You're competing with 65 other apps on a particular day for a user on mobile. So you have to find the right 3-minute slice or a 2-minute slice, and that's where your inner loop gets really, really important. So let's say that you've established that, and you have a really strong core loop. Now, how do we model for growth? So there are a few different ways to model for growth. If you're an early product, and it's the first line there, you're probably, if you're in consumer tech, B2B, there are other models as well, but if you're in consumer tech, you're looking at understanding what drives growth. If it's an early product, you're probably looking at the number of installs you get every day, and then you're looking at the retention for every cohort that comes in, and you're modeling what your daily active user would look like. If you're a mature product, and you're not getting as many new users every day, you're probably looking at how engaged your current users are. And if you can increase that engagement, what does it look like over a period of time? And then if you're thinking about monetization or revenue growth, you're looking at what are the number of users that you have, and what's the conversion of that user base, and what's the average wallet size, or what's the average transaction that they're doing with you that drives revenue. Similar models can be built for travel or for payments, which are lower frequency, right? And high touch point, and every time somebody has a touch point with your product, it's a huge transaction. You can build similar models for that as well. The fundamental thing, though, is you have to instrument, first understand your core loop, instrument those metrics, and then you have to understand your model, or build one, instrument those same metrics, and then you have to choose the right platform in order to measure and instrument metrics. It's almost as important as the act of measurement itself, to choose a platform that can actually mature with you as an organization, as a business. This is what a model can look like over time. It's really complicated. I don't want you to take away that this is not for me. It is. We started with something really simple. We just took users and retention and plotted DAU. But over time, we started looking at reactivations, we started looking at engagement, return rates, all sort of usage metrics, and then we started looking at cohorts of users instead of just a single user, and then finally we started looking at different types of conversion behavior that we could model. But the point is, it can get more complicated over time, but you have to start simple. So now you know how to measure the core loop, and you also have a model for growth. How do you iterate towards success state? And what is success state? I've met a lot of product teams that don't have a hypothesis, right? They jump directly into, oh, I have a sea of data. I'm just going to figure this out. And they end up with a sea of data and not figuring anything out. And that happens more often than not. So you always have to figure out what your success state is. And success state is usually defined as a single metric or a North Star metric. For Words with Friends, again, we modeled all of our product on moves played, or how many times do you play a word with somebody else. And when we correlated that to long-term retention, and then we correlated that to the inner loop, and we connected the inner loop to the outer loop. And we knew that that was fundamental. So we focus on that as the North Star metric. And it's up to you to figure out what your North Star metric is, or it could also be a suite of metrics that are directly correlated with growth. And product teams set goals for success state and rally the team around those goals. The next step is identifying leverage. You understand you have to understand where your product is in your life cycle. And it's important to establish what levers you want to pull in order to inflect growth. There are 3 stages of products, right? The early stage, the growth stage, and the mature product. And very often, the levers that you can pull differ based on the stage you're in. If you're an early stage product, you're probably more worried about activation or the core loop that I just talked about, making sure that it's stable and making sure you can at least read and get a read for what's happening. If you're a growth stage, you probably have stable core metrics, and now you're looking at long-term retention, and you're looking at increasing the guy that pays you money. Let's try and see if we can get more out of them, right? And then if you're a mature product, it gets really tough. And that's when you have to build that complex model that I said. You will really have to go down into the depths to understand what are those key levers that can now start pulling in order to inflect growth again. I want to walk through a scenario really quick. Let's say that product A adds 100,000 users every day and only retains 5% of its users at the end of the month. A product team has two great ideas. The feature A is increasing virality or installs. I want to get more users in the door. It's amazing. I've seen this at several investor pitches. Several. The people come in and they're like, my K factor is 17. And then there is feature B, which is increasing long-term retention. Usually in investor pitches, investors care a lot about user growth. They want to see that this product is super viral. But if you falter at keeping those users within your product, you're going to have long-term loss, right? So let's see what happened. In 1 quarter, feature A catapulted the product. They had 2.5 million users with 5% D30 retention. A lot of users. And feature B had reasonable growth. It only hit 2.1 million users with really good day 30 retention. So higher retention, but lower audience overall. And over time, what happened is feature A, virality, started getting a lot of users who weren't really engaged with the product. So, and over time, it gets tougher and tougher to add new users. So the right focus would have been to be on feature B and make sure that the product has a strong set of fundamental metrics, and then focus on virality. Get users, fix the leaky bucket, and then make sure your users are sticking. And once you have identified all these leverage points, you have to be the guy who does not sell ice cream, right? You have to prioritize really, really hard, and you have to start building what your roadmap looks like. That's step 4. I think almost everybody here knows this. The typical path that you take for building a roadmap, you brainstorm, you ideate, you define what your goals are, and then you add a bunch of ideas to the list. That's where you park your CEO's idea, that corner there, that list there, right? and then you prioritize. You have no idea how many hours as a product manager I've spent in that backlog on there, tagging 100 through 59. I'm pretty sure product managers, you would have done a lot of this, and it's a very critical exercise. And the better you are, you move from worse to good on the product manager scale, right? So we talked about 4 things, and this is the framework that I want to leave you with. But do you still sort of get a feeling that you're doing the right thing? You've improved core loop engagement. You've improved retention. You've been able to improve monetization. But how do you still know if the sum of all these parts is making a better product? So the question is, did all of this add up for the product over time, and how do we measure this? So there's a really important health metric that products can focus on, which is called customer lifetime value. Customer lifetime value is a very interesting thing, because I've seen product teams where one team focuses on retention and another team focuses on monetization, right? Classic case. How do you retain users? If you were given everything that you can do, what's the best way to retain a user? Anyone wants to care for an answer? Free stuff. Free stuff. And what happens if you give free stuff? You don't make money. So you make the other product team really unhappy. So there's this healthy tension that exists between the revenue teams and the retention teams that lifetime value can sort of solve. So measuring lifetime value over a period of time ensures that there's the right balance between retention, how long your users retain, and is it improving with every new cohort that you add, and then revenue that you're generating per that user cohort, is that improving over time as well? A healthy balance of both is really important. And it's up to product teams to sort of collaborate together and create that fire movement, right? And focus on something that's going to help the overall product. Measuring LTV over time really helps because it comprises of engagement, retention, and monetization. So it helps you answer these three questions every single day. Is the core loop engagement getting stronger over a period of time? It'll manifest in stronger LTVs. If retention is getting stronger, each cohort over time is going to generate more revenue, right? And then monetization, if users are converting at the same levels over a period of time, or if it's declining over a period of time, maybe you're giving too much free stuff. So at Qualtrics, interestingly enough, we had a free product, and we didn't know if we were giving too much away for free. So this is a great way of finding out. If retention is way too strong, maybe we're doing something wrong. So ultimately, breaking down customer signals into a suite of metrics and identifying key leverage points is vital in strategizing and building a roadmap for growth. That's what I want you to take with you out of the building today. And if anything, I really want you all to pressure test this model for me. And if you can give me feedback, more than happy to gather that feedback in one place. Maybe LinkedIn is a great place. It also helps you connect with me. With that said, thanks for listening and questions.
Hi, I'm David. I'm an entrepreneur and a product manager from China and Singapore. I'm currently a student at UW. You put UW logo there. So
Yep.
what's your experience?
So I went to a business school at UW.
Cool.
I also taught a couple of courses there, pricing, which you should take.
Yeah, for sure. So I formed a team of what I call Global Entrepreneur Network within UW. And how do you expect you to further give back to the UW and contribute more and maybe provide more mentorship for young people around the world?
Absolutely. I love UW. I went to school there, and the first thing I did when I moved back to Seattle was connect with the business school and actually start teaching. And again, part of it is pressure testing this model, but I also believe that UW has a breed of really good product managers, and so I really wanted to go out there and help people who are thinking about product management or on the cusp of being product managers to sort of help and get across the. So absolutely, mentorship, and I'll be teaching a bunch of courses at UW as well, over summer and winter.
So my question is more around how did you find, or rather, was it easy to apply the learnings that you got from Words with Friends, which is obviously a consumer product, more gaming focused, right, to your current job at Qualtrics, which is mostly enterprise focused, I'm assuming. So how has that transition been? How did you have to make any obvious shifts in terms of how you applied what you learned?
Absolutely brilliant question. Thanks for asking that. I would have ventured to ask that question if not for you. I keep getting asked this question. You're from consumer tech, and how do you apply those learnings to enterprise? And I really pressure tested this model at Qualtrics as well. And guess what? People didn't know what the core action was. Okay, that's a good reminder. So we pressure tested this. At Qualtrics, it goes back to understanding you've entered into an agreement with a customer for a year, but you still have to make sure they're getting a good product experience out of it. And you have to understand what is the fundamental core action that they're taking with the product that's giving them some benefit. With Qualtrics, at the fundamental level, it was a survey. So we started from there. We started from basics. And we were trying to understand how many administrators that we have given a license have created one survey and followed that through the entire funnel. What type of questions have they added? Have they distributed the funnel? Have they got responses? Have they exported the printed report? Have they started the second one? So we really focused on what the inner loop was and started measuring the inner loop there, and then started focusing on the outer loop. And then we started looking at what cohorts of customers that are doing this well, and what really describes them in a way that we can understand, that we can apply learnings to other places. The product is complex. So the easier you can make someone go through the core loop, the inner loop and the outer loop, the stickier the product gets. And the recent trend is the consumerization of the enterprise. Like with Slack, perfect case of enterprise product, but the goodness from consumer tech. The team that built a game before and failed 4 times in a row finally figured out how to build a sticky game or a sticky product, and they went and built Slack. So that's a perfect example. But the question was, what type of tools did I use to capture surveys? Qualtrics. So I did use Qualtrics for capturing surveys. And then, was your second question around how I...
What type of product management tools did you use to capture feedback and help prioritize?
Absolutely. So at Qualtrics, I can talk to you specifically. We take customer signals from multiple places. And as a product manager, our biggest role is to find the signal amidst the noise. It's really easy as a product manager to go talk to a customer, the most vocal customer, and respond to all their needs, and then build a roadmap out of one single customer's needs. But then you build something that's custom specific that just fits to them and does not fit anybody else. So we try to understand who has the most surface area with customers. So we start hunting for people in customer success who have a breadth of relationships with customers, and we try to figure out what the top 10 signals are from all customer-facing employees at the organization that can boil themes to us and give us themes rather than noise. So that's one way that we have gathered feedback. We always try to increase this footprint. If we can understand every single customer's pain point and boil it down to themes, we would do that. So at every point, we're trying to expand our listening posts. So one is CSMs, another one is in-product feedback, the third one would be testing with an early customer group, and then we keep expanding over and over again. With consumer tech, it's analytics. We spent a lot of time with data. We formed a hypothesis, and we used data to make sure that we had data to capture scenarios that we are essentially blindsided. We were not looking at data in a way to figure out what the problem was, but we had a hypothesis, and then we were looking at data to sort of either understand if the hypothesis is right, or if there are some other scenarios that existed that caught us blindsided. So I hope that answered your question.
Thanks. Hope it's a good one. So a lot of the
All
examples
questions
you mentioned relate to kind of production, like the user creates something. So like other products are more focused on consumption of things. So I'm curious how much you might think that it would affect kind of the core values that are the core concepts that are pulled, right? Like maybe Flipboard, where I'm viewing articles as opposed to having to build a game, for example.
So is your question around if your product is something that your consumers have to build every day or produce every day versus they're just consuming?
Yes, exactly.
So most of the concepts still exist. Your consumers, your users of your product are doing some core action within your product and reaping some benefit. In a consumption world, it's knowledge. So what benefit are they getting? And can you break it down into an inner loop and an outer loop so that it becomes more sticky? In a builder world, you still have to go answer that fundamental question: what is that core action that you can build off? And what's that core action that can turn into a daily habit? There's a lightweight investment that the customer can make, and they can reap some sort of small reward from it. And then what's that heavyweight investment that you can progress them towards as a progressive disclosure that they can reap a higher reward for, and makes it stickier. So you can still apply these fundamental principles to any type of product, really. All right.
Thank you, Shek.
Thanks for your questions, guys.